wanted to talk a little bit more about Wing Chun and some of the things that, some of the principles involved, okay? One thing that's really fun is this idea of having an open door, right? So when force is coming towards us, we can actually create a pathway for this force to kind of flow, kind of by us. And so a lot of Chinese martial arts are similar that way. Like you'll see Tai Chi where they'll come forward and they'll kind of flow back, or they'll flow back and then forward, right? And so they're kind of creating this space to absorb or to let things, flow by one way or another, right? So Wing Chun does something kind of similar, where when force is coming forward, quite often we'll meet it, but then we'll pivot. So wherever that force is like hitting us, we'll put out a structure that kind of is firm but yet soft and yielding. And so when that force comes, we kind of feel that and we can kind of let it flow where it wants to go, right? And so other Chinese martial arts, they kind of do this in like a big way. Like you'll see them like flowing one way and then coming back, right? But this is taking way too much time, right? So if a boxer is just throwing stuff, right, really quick, and I mean, this is slow, right? This is slow, but they're doing really quick stuff, then this big yielding movement and then this coming back is just way too slow. And so Wing Chun tends to kind of meet it halfway. So when something comes, we might intercept, but then we're also yielding part of that power. But as it meets and is starting to be absorbed, then we tend to shoot along the same line of that attack and maybe even stick and follow it. Follow it back up to the source. And so quite often, instead of a big flowing movement and then another movement to strike, Wing Chun is more about this idea of maybe following the movement slightly and then coming straight back into it. So it's a much shorter, quicker pathway to the source where the power's coming from, without being such a big movement and yielding like other Chinese martial arts, and this idea of a tree being bent and whipping back, right? So with Wing Chun, it can even be right here. As small of a movement as that, and yet my body is actually yielding and making an opening just in an inch or two, and then striking. Or covering the attack and blending with it, and then striking. That's all we need in Wing Chun. And quite often we'll jam part of their attack as we do that, right? Where the Shaolin I was taught, big giant block and then a returning movement and then maybe another movement and another movement and another movement, right? Each one of these movements taking 10 years, right? Where Wing Chun, it's almost instantaneously happening as we counter and we flow, we blend with whatever's coming at us, becoming empty or full when we need to be, right? And of course, we also move our base so we don't step forward and get pulled off balance, right? So we use our base. So that's our forward stance is right here, which is just like our Wing Chun goat riding stance, but it's one leg is locked in like the goat riding stance and the other one's more forward. See, I got pretty white legs because I'm kind of a gothic guy from back in the day. Anyway, quite often in Wing Chun, you see him doing a forward stance like this, when really it should be this way. And the reason why is this keeps anybody from kicking up between your legs in your stance and hitting your groin. Okay? So that's locked in as we move. That stance, right? And what's so totally cool is in our normal goat riding stance, we can shift into those forward stances, right? So when energy comes at us, we can shift, right? But we can also do that from our forward stance. So if energy comes at me, I can go this way, or I can go this way, right? So there's a little bit of room to actually pivot on this lead leg to one way, one side or the other. And so that's the genius of the Wing Chun stances, is it accomplishes in 3 stances, or actually 2, what Shaolin uses: archer stance, empty stance, cat stance, horse stance, and various stances to do, right? Wing Chun can do everything in just the 2 stances, the forward stance and the goat riding stance. Now, quite often this goat riding stance isn't really used square on to an opponent. Quite often it's used sideways. After we become engaged with the opponent's arms and the flurry, we might turn in and hook with this inward pulled leg, and we'll hook one of their legs and pull them and hit them and attack, right? So that's the other thing that this Wing Chun stance is used for. And what's interesting is in Aikido, they have something called the master stance. Well, it's our Wing Chun stance. Same thing, right? So some other tidbits there about Wing Chun. The other idea is with this opening, and I'll have students that just push me and I'll just relax and I'll flow back, right? And I call that wooden peg stuck in the ground, right? So one of my legs is empty and the other is the peg. So when I get pushed, they're just opening up a door, right? And so at first for a defense, it's good. I might use a dai bong, a low bong. But for offense, when they push, then I'll turn, but I'll start going forward with that energy back into them. So then when the energy comes, I'll be there, but then I can go straight in on them, right? So after that yielding moment, I can move straight right back in. So anyway, some other tidbits about the Wing Chun. I'll talk to you later.